Now that we are halfway done with our retrospective of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 2, I thought it'd be appropriate to take a bit of a breather and go back and make some corrections and addendums to previous analysis, episode by episode. So if you're new to this channel and you're for the main analysis, or you're returning and want to catch up on the things that you may have missed, there is a link to the playlist of all the videos of the actual Season 2 retrospective that we have so far in the description. Plus, I wanted to take an opportunity to involve you guys watching more into my videos, so I shall be addressing quite a bit of your comments to either bounce off of or refute or add to or etc. Mostly as a thank you, because without you guys watching and commenting, or whether you disagree or agree with my points or some kind of mix of the two, this channel can't go on. Actually, yes, it can, but it wouldn't be as awesome. Actually, yes, it would be, because I'm here, but it wouldn't be as... It won't be the same. Let's just put it that way, for better or for worse. Plus, I spend all my time bringing up things that are wrong with these episodes and criticizing them. Therefore, it's only fair I get a taste of my own medicine. Actually, it's not fair, because I'm awesome and sexy. Then again, the show itself is sexy and awesome, I guess, so all's fair in love and war, or however that saying goes. I don't even think I'm using it properly. So the main criticism/correction I got for this video wasn't even what I said about the actual episode itself, but what I said here. No one knew that there would be an older fanbase on the way. The tone of the Season 2 opener had nothing to do with reaction to the fanbase. I appreciate you're trying to inform, but please be careful about presenting your interpretations and theories as fact. Roasted? You just got burned by somebody who can't even tell they're yours apart. Well, in response to this, I got multiple comments. Yes, saying that this actually is grammatically correct, because she's saying, I appreciate you're trying to inform, as in this person's trying to inform, and not I appreciate that you are trying to inform. And I really do mean multiple comments about this. Okay, I get it. Gah! Sure, I guess for my point of an undeniably true, she should have, or she would have said, I appreciate that you're trying, and with the way it is here, it really could be either way. But the reason I jumped straight into thinking it was an error was because, as somebody who's read quite a bit of Lauren Faust's writings when researching information about behind-the-scenes stuff for these retrospectives, I see that she's definitely not immune to making grammar mistakes sometimes, such as these. Therefore, forgive me if I was a little predispositioned to think that whenever I see what looks to be a clunky sentence from her, I wouldn't be too surprised if it actually was a mistake. Then again, Lauren Faust is a goddess, and she does not make mistakes. She did make Friendship is Magic after all. So, who knows? As for things actually relevant to the episode itself, JW said, with how much you point out animation errors, I'm surprised you didn't catch that Pinky has the element of kindness here. That's quite interesting, especially when it's not like the joke is that Twilight gave them the wrong elements in a rush.
Necklace, 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 and big crown thingy. Come on, every pony, let's go.
Since we see Fluttershy have the same one in the scene. What a scam! But on the topic of what I said here, wow, I guess this pony was so accomplished that she ended up getting 2 of the exact same statues built for her right next to each other. Zek Draco said, I think the 2 pony statues that are the same are supposed to be like entrance statues, like how a library will have 2 lion statues at the entrance, or like how a temple will sometimes have 2 of the same dog statues at the door. Those statues are essentially entrance statues, as we can see them both next to the entrance/exit. That would neatly wrap everything in a bow, but based on this other angle showing this statue repeated when it wouldn't be there in relation to this statue from this angle, yeah, I'm beginning to think that this garden just arbitrarily reuses statues, always at the same angle and everything. Other than that, I don't think there were any major points in the comments left to address, but something I did leave out of the actual analysis is what Pinky says here.
Eternal chaos comes with chocolate rain, you guys. Chocolate rain!
Which may be a reference to the song/early internet meme Chocolate Rain by Tay Zonde.
Chocolate rain. Some stay dry and others feel the pain. Chocolate rain.
It seems to have been widely known enough, with more than enough time to sit in the public consciousness, for this to be an intentional reference they snuck in. If this were an intentional reference, the whole thing came full circle when Tay Zonde did a cover of the My Little Pony theme song.
I used to wonder what friendship could buy.
Which acts as a very nice response to that potential reference. Which is actually a pretty good example of things to come with the show. And in regards with how we're going to eventually be seeing My Little Pony and the internet kind of becoming synonymous as the show proceeds, Another example of this being how I brought up what may or may not be a 9cat reference a few episodes from here. Whoa, is that a 9cat reference? It would seem to line up since 9cat was one of the most viewed videos of 2011, and this episode came out as the year was coming to a close. So that makes sense. Except not so fast because this exact design was first drawn in 2008, a whole 3 years before its inclusion in this episode. Then again, the original version doesn't take place in space like 9cat, so I don't know, man. You be the judge, but I guess we'll never know. But tangents aside, there is another thing I did say in this episode's analysis that people were kind of put off by. But we'll come back to that at the end. Let's just move on to the next episode. So for this one, I was personally passed out for most of the analysis. It's not like the episode itself is going to contain any themes of stress and deadlines, so let's just get started with the episode already.
I'm supposed to send Princess Celestia a letter every week, not every other week, every single week.
I can't do this anymore, man. I just got betrayed by the one thing that I actually like in this universe. I can't. Oh. Well, it seems as if the usual host of this channel has passed out. Yet a video must still be made. I guess we have no choice but to carry on with the far more handsome talent as the host for this video. So the non-evil version of me, A+, had to take over. Hey, let me just read some comments here about you, and you tell me what you think, because I found some pretty interesting ones.
Sure, that sounds fair enough.
Sleepy Midge says about you, I feel about A+ like everyone feels about Donkey in Shrek or Patrick in SpongeBob or something. Like, he feels funny when he's rarely on screen, but not when he's taking the lead role. Roasted! Take that!
What? You know what? I was just gonna drop by and say hi and leave right after, but just because of that, I'm staying. What other ridiculous stuff is there about me?
He calls her Purple Horse even though he's got tons of MLP horses in the back, including Purple Horse, and actually it's a show about ponies.
Yeah, because in case you couldn't tell, like I said in the video...
Now, I don't know anything about this show because I'm not a 9-year-old girl, but I'll give it a try anyway, I suppose.
Me and this loser are not the same person. I don't like My Little Pony and find this whole thing disgusting. I honestly find all this stuff disgusting. Why do you even have this?
That's rich. And your act of comparing Twilight's overthinking to you cheating on your girlfriend with her sister isn't?
Well, ex-girlfriend now to be precise, but I'm a little confused on your wording. Why are you phrasing it as if I've only done that with one person before?
Anyways, the reason I let A go on as much as I did in the analysis of this episode, rather than just waiting until I was right in the head again for another attempt, is because the episode has themes of overcoming anxiety and stuff. And I thought he'd probably have more insight into that, as opposed to what would be my advice to that, which would be, suck it up, Buttercup. They ain't getting any younger. Then again, some of you guys might have actually benefited from that better than A+ talking about the benefits of cheating on your significant other.
I barely call any of them significant.
Well, a point actually relevant to this episode that I didn't bring up is how we get this. Which might have been a reference to bronies, and how at this stage in the show's run, the fandom was starting to grow, with this summing up older males secretly playing with this doll that's originally targeted towards little girls. Once again indicating an early sign of how My Little Pony and the internet kind of ends up feeding each other in a feedback loop as the show goes on. But like I said, we'll examine that in more detail as we actually go on with the show. Another thing I left unmentioned was this scene.
Oh, Rainbow Dash, you don't have to hide your feelings from me.
And out of context, this seems like it would result in a totally different scene. Oh, I'm sure some of you guys would have actually preferred it that way. Perverts. One point I didn't even catch on in this episode is how, like Soul SLVR commented, Celestia didn't even bother telling her sister that everyone thinks she is a cannibal after she got unfrozen from the moon. That's true. You'd expect Celestia to have given some kind of debriefing to Luna to catch her up to speed on the 1,000-some-odd years she was gone, especially with the context of her still being princess over Equestria. Man, a thing a bunch of you guys pointed out was what I said here. I wonder where he would have also gotten this costume, considering it's custom tailored for a baby dragon. And with the knowledge we have of the universe from the show till this point, this would be an unsolvable mystery. Since we've seen no evidence of other baby dragons in the show so far, I mean, even knowing what we know now, I guess it still is kind of an unsolvable mystery. Besides the assumption that he got it custom made. Then again, there's also small bipedal creatures like this. So who knows, maybe there's a place that just sells bipedal costumes. With you guys all practically saying I'm an idiot for not thinking Rarity made Spike's costume. I was going off the impression that Rarity would be too stingy with her time to make Spike a costume, especially considering how selfish, or at least not Spike-caring, she seems to be in certain episodes. But in retrospect, or in retrospect of the retrospective, judging by how Twilight made her own costume, it would make sense if it was Twilight who made Spike this costume. Then again, I guess the same logic could also be used here, since Twilight might also think it's a bit of a waste of time to make Spike a silly little dragon costume. Who knows? You be the judge. We'll come back to this a little later, but I guess just based on the information we do have, I don't know, maybe Spike made his own costume. I just thought it was a little weird for a purple dragon to be wearing a purple dragon costume. Man. And on that topic, I think to add on to what I said about Rainbow Dash's costume, I'm not sure how Rainbow Dash got a costume that looks exactly like something that she only saw briefly in a vision in the fog. That's quite an accomplishment. Some commenters suggested that she may have made it herself as well, judging by the stitching job, but I'm not sure if Rainbow Dash has the artistic dexterity for something like this, nor the patience that would be required for something like this. So, now, I know this is technically where you're supposed to stop looking for a logical solution and go, it's just a kid's show, but it's also the fact that they purposely gave her a worse stitching job than the other professional costumes, meaning that whoever was behind these creative decisions about these costumes actually put in more thought into this than not doing so. Another thing I got some comments about was this.
My very first nightmare night ever!
Is this to suggest that he's 1 year old? Probably not, right? Does this mean that Trottingham just doesn't observe the holiday? I guess you could make the argument that Nightmare Moon just wasn't a widely known thing there, which you could use the fact that Nightmare Moon specifically showed up to Ponyville to torment them in episode 1 as an argument for that. But surely the consequences of Nightmare Moon becoming a thing impacted everywhere, including Trottingham, unless Celestia just covered the whole thing up. So I don't know how there's a whole holiday based on her, but sure. The whole incident didn't even originate in Ponyville after all. It originated in Canterlot. So you'd think this would be a more well-known holiday, but okay. Commenters have reminded me that this whole thing actually originated in the Everfree Forest, not Canterlot, which is right beside Ponyville, and thus not important for Trottingham to know anything about it. Which, yeah, makes sense because obviously the castle of the two sisters is in the ruins of the Everfree Forest. But I was just going off by the beginning flashback thingy in the first episode, where we get a shot of the Canterlot castle and then them fighting. The episode where we actually see the fight happened completely slipped my mind. Plus, it's still the princesses who raised the sun and moon literally fighting, and that doesn't seem like nothing. But yeah, that still doesn't mean that every single nation is going to automatically make a holiday based off of it. So I guess that was just a bad point on my part. It's just that it takes a couple steps to arrive at the conclusion of why this line was even in here, and if it actually makes sense. Because on its own, that doesn't really imply anything about why Ponyville is the only place that celebrates this holiday. But now we know that it's probably because it happened right next to them. I don't know. Then again, since we're not at season 4 in the retrospective, I was going off by memory on what we have covered so far. One thing I actually have zero excuse for is what I said here. Okay, that's a funny visual gag, but is the implication that she can't morph her teeth? I get that's the joke, but maybe it's actually clever, since perhaps that implies that while she can shapeshift her body, she can't shapeshift her bones. That gives us some pretty cool insight into magic of this world. As this commenter let me know, teeth aren't bones. Yeah, I stand corrected. I guess I just heard that they were at some point and took it as fact and never really cared enough to verify for myself. I'm not perfect, therefore I shall be taking my life shortly after this video is complete. Where's my gun?
Ooh, if we find it, can I do the honors?
Yeah, either way is fine. We'll negotiate after this video is over. Moving on. One thing I was looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts for was about what I said here. However, this is really making me question why in the flashback in the episode Cutie Mark Chronicles, Rarity's already working in the boutique. How does that fit into this? I guess one could make the argument that it used to be her parents' workplace, but I'm not sure about that either. If we take a look at their cutie marks, her father has 3 footballs and her mom has cookies. Those don't really seem like cutie marks to belong to people who would originally own a boutique, but I guess technically this building could have initially been used for football and or cookie related purposes. And some of you said that it might have originally belonged to our grandparents. Quite possibly. I like that idea. Something I probably should add is how, while I did go off about the logistics of Applejack and Rarity's mud switcheroo, it's a little strange how Applejack was able to remain in this puddle the whole time, especially because that means that this pile was dug deep enough to sink a whole pony into. Also, that means that Applejack held her breath for the duration of the entire race. And in show, the race lasts for about 2 minutes. Sure, Applejack, as an athletic pony, can most definitely hold her breath for longer periods of time, but how about Rarity? You don't see her going into the puddle, meaning that she must have been in there for a while. And according to high rocket science, ponies, like all horses, cannot breathe under mud. Therefore, just to make it up to Sweetie Belle, Rarity put her life on the line for who knows how long. From the start of this scene, it takes 1 minute and 40 seconds for Rarity to emerge from the puddle. But also, pay attention to how her entire muzzle is covered in mud, making it impossible for her to breathe without being a complete mouth breather. And it's not like she can wipe it off, otherwise she'll expose the fact that she is Rarity to Sweetie Belle. I did come to find out that this was actually probably a reference to this old movie called A Day at the Races, where this happens.
The boat's down! Stop, he's down! It's number 7. That's the winner.
Basically, the context is that these 2 horses fall in the mud, and there's a little switcheroo, which is pretty much what happens in the episode. So honestly, that kind of solves the problem of them throwing away logistics if it was for the sake of throwing in this reference. My wrath has been extinguished. For now, moving on. That was quick. Okay, there's not really one centralized point to draw from the comments here, but I do think putting a bunch of them into consideration, they seem to be getting that what I argued to be filler in this episode wasn't actually filler, and it's only because I binged these episodes that it makes it feel like filler. Okay, so first of all, I'm not binging for these retrospectives. These are coming out on a weekly basis, which is at the same pace the actual episodes were coming out in. So I think that's completely fair. Plus, I'm going one at a time and giving each of them a long time for me to sit and reflect upon. Hence why I think the Season 2 retrospective is a bit more reflective and better thought out than the Season 1 one, where I just divide into 3 parts and doing like 8 to 10 episodes per video. Sure, that you could definitely argue was rushed. And in fact, I plan to go back and redo some of the Season 1 stuff eventually. We'll see if we find time for it. No, but back to the topic of this. No, I'm getting each episode per week and reflecting on whether they are good or bad or what parts are good or bad. So no, I disagree with the idea that my opinions are the result of binging. But I get the idea. I'm sure if this was the only episode of the show you ever watch, you'd go away thinking it's not the worst thing ever, maybe even wanting to check out another episode or 2. And that makes sense. In fact, I can't really think of a single episode of the show that would make for a terrible introductory episode that'll make someone actively say no to the rest of it. I get that, and if this was the first episode you watched, you might not think it's as bad. However, it's just that if you judge this episode in context of the show and the season, and not from binging, but just actually, taking time to analyze the episode and see where it sits within the show, and how the characters in the episode and how the events in the episode actually relate to everything else in the show, like you're kind of supposed to if you want to be a fan of something. One of my issues with this episode is that if you do juxtapose it with all the episodes before it in the season so far, we had banger after banger after banger. Because we got a battle against a world-ending villain, an exploration of a mental breakdown that adds a lot of emotional layers to the show, the grand return of a fan-favorite character to expand on lore, a heartwarming episode about family with more exploration of a main character's home life, and now this thing where half the episode is just hula hoop tricks. Yeah, I'd argue that's a bit of a fall off regardless of the pace you watch these episodes in. Maybe one thing I can do is to judge these episodes based on where they are in the context of the show, but also based on how they are just as its own thing. Though I think for the most clear and unbiased look at that, I think you'd want to ask people who aren't, already a fan of the show. But on the bright side of this episode, some of you brought up how there are some cool story potential and implications with the cutie pucks, such as how having multiple cutie marks is an interesting concept they never did anything else with. Also, how the idea of your cutie mark determining your talent and purpose instead of it being the other way around is pretty interesting. I agree, since that's cool world-building logistics that I wish they would have explored more. But that's probably another thing that irks me about this episode. They had the chance to explore more of this universe's logic, but instead they spent time showing us Apple Bloom's hula hoop tricks and her spinning plates. Awesome.
A lovely new chapeau will cheer you up.
One thing I forgot to mention is how it seems as though Scootaloo is flying here when she obviously can't, but she seems to just be jumping and hovering, which, I mean, I guess one could argue is kind of the same thing as flying, but it only lasts for about 3 seconds, so oh well. One point brought up for this episode that completely slipped my mind is how Fluttershy is weird for going along with Rainbow Dash's idea for a shallow competition. That's a great point, especially when she doesn't even try putting a stop to anything after seeing how life-threatening this contest gets. With this comment, pointing out how Fluttershy actually goes out of her way to abuse animals herself in a way in later seasons by forcing herbivore diets onto carnivores. I actually don't remember that, so I'm looking forward to getting to that with the retrospective. But to loop back to the Return of Harmony for a sec, Claus says, I'm surprised you didn't mention how Fluttershy, of all people, is feeding animals chocolate, which is poisonous to them, especially rabbits, who would be especially sensitive to small amounts due to being so tiny.
Oh dear, I hope that none of the animals see these delicious chocolate-filled cotton candy clouds. I'd hate to have to share them.
Oh, you and me both, sister. Hey!
That's true! What the heck? I guess Fluttershy really is the true animal abuser here. Now, I would usually use this as an excuse to bash on Fluttershy, but because we've actually not been seeing too much of her in Season 2 so far, with her not having her own episode until episode 19, I hate to say this, but I actually kind of miss her, and making fun of her here kind of seems like... Okay, let's say you have a bully, right? Actually, not a bully victim. And eventually, this bully victim goes missing, and every time you walk in town, you see posters hung up, missing persons posters with your bully victim's face and name on it. I mean, sure, every instinct in your body is telling you to make fun of this guy. This is a good cheap shot that you can make. There's this guy you usually bully, and now he's missing. You can make a bunch of jokes about that. Oh, hope he stays missing. Missing? I don't miss him. Oh, how ironic. You are missing, and I'll be found in your mom's bed tonight. It's like, at the same time, before you actually let those jokes escape your mouth, you feel a little bad seeing someone you gave such a hard time being actually missing and you don't know where they are. Are they just lost because they, I don't know, hiked off trail, or have they been kidnapped? Or if they are kidnapped, are they currently, you know, going through torture, or are they just... You get the point. So if you were to make fun of this guy again, it would have to be until after he is found safe and alive. So I'll let all these criticisms of Fluttershy slip for now. But on the topic of Rainbow Dash being an animal abuser or not, this commenter said that she isn't, with her just not understanding the implications of her reckless behavior. Whereas this commenter brings up her behavior from a future episode where she does this.
And then I have to take Tank to the vet. His sensitive tortoise tummy's been acting up again.
Poor Tank had all the telltale signs of sugar overload.
That's kind of messed up. Plus, I'm not sure ignorance really excuses not taking care of your pet properly, and is probably, in fact, the symptom of being an animal abuser / neglector. If anything, yeah, I'm pretty sure ignorance is neglect, especially when she ignores all warnings about Tank's health in future episodes.
I told you, Rainbow Dash, I'm a dragon.
But if you don't have to hibernate, why should Tank?
Because he's a tortoise, and I'm a dragon.
Same family though, right?
No!
I'll take that as a yes.
Roasted? I think that might be like a top 5 Rainbow Dash moment. Hearing no and saying I'll take that as a yes. But at the same time, yeah, hearing that I wouldn't really trust any of my pets with Rainbow Dash. Some of you brought up how you can't be an animal abuser if you are an animal yourself. Or at least highlighting the supposed absurdity of this claim. But first of all, based on biological classification, humans are animals. So I guess by this logic, humans can't be animal abusers since they're both animals. Second of all, if you're going to draw a line and say, well, humans, the animal, are different from the animals they actually abuse. Well, so is Rainbow Dash from these guys. Now, on the contrary, I would definitely classify humans, such as you or I, as distinct from all other creatures on Earth, based on factors such as intelligence and ingenuity and spirit. But going off by the logic of these comments, I guess you can't be a human abuser if you yourself are human. Plus, the ponies in the show obviously display the things that I just mentioned, intelligence, ingenuity, and spirit, in ways that the other animals in the show don't. So, explain! Honestly, with this episode, I think I've pretty much said everything I wanted to say about it during the actual episode retrospective. A lot of what you guys said in regards to the main six's attitude towards Rainbow Dash seems to mirror what I said in the analysis, though there were a few other perspectives, such as Rhapsody HC, who mentioned, "This episode is misunderstood. Rainbow lost sight of being a hero. She only cared about the fame. When Mare-Duel appeared, she immediately got jealous, and being a hero became a competition to her. Instead of allowing another hero to shine, she saw Mare-Duel as a threat. It's very clear Rainbow was in the wrong." Sure, I would agree with that. If Mare-Duel was an actual superhero and not a literal gaslighting attempt by Rainbow Dash's best friends. Speaking of disagreements, there were some towards what I said for this part.
I've been hoof-picked by Rainbow Dash herself to write her autobiography.
Autobiographies are supposed to be written by the pony they are about.
Maybe for your normal run-of-the-mill ponies. But I'm far too busy saving lives to stop and write.
That's a good point. If she's actually saving lives, then I wouldn't mind if she relegated autobiography duties to somebody else. If anything, that's more humble. If the rhetoric here was to make Rainbow Dash seem egotistical and unauthentic by making somebody else write what's going to be published as her own writing, it doesn't even really work. Not only because she literally just admitted this in front of her closest followers, meaning this isn't even supposed to be hidden information, but also because a better way of showcasing her ego in relation to an autobiography would have been to make her get busy with writing it, about just writing her own life story rather than going out and saving lives. Oh, you missed the joke. The joke is that Rainbow Dash is calling this book an autobiography when Spike writing it would make it a normal biography. It's not that this slipped my mind. The reason I said that is because the first autobiographies that come to my mind when reflecting on the scene were all written by ghostwriters. Then I did a little bit more research on it, and apparently up to 100% of famous autobiographies might actually all be written by ghostwriters, which makes sense since, people more deemed as important by societal standards have less time to actually write something, let alone actually have the writing abilities to make a compelling and captivating narrative, which I understand that if it's their story that they want to tell yet they don't have the capabilities of actually writing it makes sense to get a ghostwriter. So yes, based on what we still consider as autobiographies in real life, I have no problem classifying this as an autobiography. Plus, the job of a normal biography is to offer some analysis and interpretation of the subject's life and not to be a first-hand account of their life, like what this thing being written seems to be. I guess all this is stuff that I could have clarified during the actual episode analysis because obviously, not everyone is going to have the exact same thought process as me and land to the same conclusion as me. But at a certain point, you guys probably just want me to move on to the next scene rather than breaking down every possible different interpretation of every word or joke that's said in the show. Or maybe you too, who knows? It's just that, especially when I want to get a video out instead of taking forever between every single upload like I used to, I'd much rather just say what's on my mind at the time and get it out with how I think at the time, and then go back to clarify on what actually needs clarification. Such as this right now, in a designated time where I can address everything at once. I think that's a bit more efficient with all of our times rather than stalling every single time. Another thing that some of you brought up was on this point.
That's why I hired Spike as my ghostwriter.
Spike the ghost!
I like how this mention of a ghost scaring Pinky may be a reference to how we've seen that she's a bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to the paranormal.
The zombie pony?
Zombie pony?
On multiple occasions, sorta.
Everyone, let's dump some candy and get out of here!
Which is a cool callback and all, but then again, one of the first impressions of her in the entire show involved her encouraging us to not be scared of those. Ghosts in particular, as a matter of fact.
Giggle at the ghostly, guffaw at the grossly.
So, I don't know. And how what I said here is bad because in Luna Eclipsed, Pinky states that she doesn't actually get scared.
She's changed, Pinky. She's not evil or scary anymore. And she definitely doesn't want to gobble you up.
Well, duh.
Huh?
Sometimes it's just really fun to be scared.
I don't know, it's just the first time she sees scary stuff in Friendship is Magic Part 2, she brings up her coping mechanism of fear. and not information that she's never not scared in the first place. And the only time her acting scared was clearly a joke was in Luna Eclipsed. So I was just trying to compliment the show for having some semblance of continuity in between the episodes and not bring up the outlier in the middle, especially since some of these episodes actually have bad continuity. I wanted to give as much balance as possible. Then again, yeah, she could have just as easily have been joking here, and what she said in Luna Eclipse could have been the result of giggling at the ghosties like she mentioned doing before. So, you know, I guess there's no contradiction here. I just left out a step. Speaking of stuff I left out, this seems like an appropriate time to list off all the references this episode had that I didn't mention yet. Rainbow Dash saying this.
Never fear, your friendly neighborhood rainbow!
Excuse me? Do you think you could skip your catchphrase and just hurry up and save us?
Is obviously a play on your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and there's no need to fear, Underdog is here. The mysterious Mare-Duel's design is a parody-ish thing of Darkwing Duck. One of the storyboarders for this episode, Sabrina Alberghetti, worked on Darkwing Duck comics before. That's actually really, really funny. And this rally poster of Mare-Duel is a parody of this Batman the Animated Series poster. Awesome. One thing we got a couple comments on were about this line.
All of those ponies look so posh. And with the Grand Galloping Gala coming up, I bet you could totally get some of them to buy your dresses.
Saying that because of this line in the episode, this episode must take place before Season 1's The Best Night Ever. However, no, I don't think so. Not only because of what I brought up here, it's kind of cool how if we take a closer look at these pillars, you'll see that they have cracks on them, which is a really good callback to The Best Night Ever and how these were broken in that episode. This episode is on fire when it comes to all these callbacks, but also because the Grand Galloping Gala is an annual event, plus the cracks in the pillars. Using Occam's razor, they are likely talking about an upcoming gala. Because once again, this is an annual event. Do we expect every episode to take place between the first episode and the finale of Season 1? Though, the issue is that we don't actually get another gala episode until Season 5. And I have no idea if the gala mentioned in this episode is about that one, meaning that Seasons 2 through 5 all take place in 1 year, or if we just skipped having episodes about certain annual galas in between. But I guess we'll get there when we get there. I think this comment by Clipper McFlipper sums it up pretty well. This line honestly confused me and still does to this day. It implies that a gala episode for Season 2 was planned, but that never happened until Season 5, which was the last gala episode of the show. It feels like this episode was lost in the shuffle. Speaking of the gala, we got a comment referring to what I said here. The last notable Twilight/Celestia interaction we had in the show was in Lesson 0, where Twilight gets in trouble, which is, especially in Season 1, the most extended interaction they had was similarly to Lesson 0, Twilight overthinking that Celestia will punish her.
You have no idea what the princess is gonna do if she finds you're the one who took her pet, do you? She might banish you from Equestria, or throw you in a dungeon, or banish you and then throw you in a dungeon in the place that she banishes you to.
And after that, ruining the Grand Galloping Gala. Celestia literally stated that it was the best Grand Galloping Gala ever because of the main six's chaos. That was the whole plot twist of the episode. They didn't ruin anything at all. Well, yeah, I mean, the context I was saying this in is how Twilight somehow had the courage to ask the princess for a favor, even with most of their previous interactions that we saw between them were completely negative. Yes, Celestia did say that she personally enjoyed the chaos, but I was saying this in the perspective of how the rest of the Canterlot ponies probably wouldn't have seen it that way, which would negatively reflect on Princess Celestia and perhaps even the reputation of the Grand Galloping Gala. My point was that I don't see why Celestia would have opened up more opportunities for her kingdom's reputation to be diminished a little, unless she just really, really doesn't care. And on the other hand, how Twilight doesn't feel bad for asking, even if the person harmed technically didn't mind. That would be like, I don't know, I did some kind of prank towards you. Let's say this prank almost killed you with you narrowly escaping for your life. And I was like, dude, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. But now let's say your reaction to that is, you know what, Eff, you're so handsome, you're sexy, you're cute, it's fine. In fact, water under the bridge. Mistakes happen. After surviving, we can both laugh about it. I'm alive and that's what matters. In fact, I'm glad that you gave me this near-death experience. And I personally find it very funny. Okay, I'm glad that you find it funny, but I personally think that was a terrible mistake on my part, and I shouldn't do anything like that again, nor should I proceed to ask you for any favors afterwards, even if you were completely fine with it. I don't know. I guess what I said was just unclear wording on my part. Once again, just probably the result of assuming that everyone who watches has the same train of thought as me. Whoopsie daisy. But I hope that kind of brought some clarification. Then again, once again, judging by how there's an implication of another gala that they're looking forward to, I guess Celestia just really doesn't mind how things reflect on her reputation. So in the example I just used, that would be like, oh, you know what? Here, I bought you this pranking set for you to use on me next time. That's messed up. But also, I want to give a thanks to everyone who entertained my hypothetical question here. The only one that rubs me the wrong way is this dress that she has on, originally from an imagination sequence in the Ticketmaster. I guess it's a little disgusting how this was probably just a result of them reusing assets without considering it originally, doesn't actually exist. But I guess she could have, made it in real life afterwards, or she's been imagining herself in a dress that she already has in real life. Now that I think about it, when we daydream about ourselves in situations, unless it's a scene where you're actively imagining yourself wearing something in particular, do we picture ourselves in clothes that we have or just random clothes? Or that's a serious question. I want you guys to think about the last time you've imagined yourself. Were you wearing clothes that you already own, or were you just like wearing generic clothes? I don't know. Let me know. We got a lot of differing perspectives on this, such as I imagine myself in clothes from my Pinterest board. I imagine myself with clothes that I have already owned. I never thought about it. I don't know if I even have clothes in my dreams. I especially liked this answer. I'm usually in my school uniform in dream sequences. I like that because I don't think that's a perspective or answer that I would have ever thought of when considering this for myself. And I'm glad that somebody said that because that is a really cool perspective. I'm pretty sure I may have eventually landed on that kind of theoretical answer, but I wouldn't have conviction or evidence that that would actually be the case for a person in that theoretical. So I'm glad that this comment exists to kind of quell that suspicion. Even if this ultimately doesn't really change anyone's lives. It changed mine because I'm glad that you guys are taking time to listen to what I'm saying and reflecting in the comments. And that's really cool. It did change my life. I hope that my videos can kind of uplift you guys as well. So that little bit of sweetness out of the way, moving on. So, as to be expected, there was a lot of division in the comments of this one, not because of any points I made, but because there's quite a few different strong positions one could take about the Sparity ship, but most people were echoing on the sides that I already brought up in the actual analysis. And like I said, I think these answers pretty much encapsulate the biggest opinions one may have on this dynamic. The first one being that it's weird because they're different species. Second one being the fact that they're different species is fine, but the age difference is weird. And third perspective is Rarity is manipulative. And I think this kind of transcends the whole age and species thing. Even if Spike was an appropriately aged individual here, and they were both ponies, Rarity's behavior seems to be a sticking point. Now, even though all of that was covered in the analysis already, what I left out was how I personally feel about the ship myself. Well, I think I phrased the question as whether the ship is right or wrong, but I think a good general rule of thumb when it comes to stuff like this is, or a good general rule of thumb to literally any decision in existence is instead of asking if it's right or wrong, ask yourself if it's wise and based on wisdom and if you'll be happy with the decision or regret the decision after a given time. I can provide an in-show and a meta example for this. Okay, so let's go with the real-life example first. Let's say it's 4 a.m. on a school night. You have to get up in 3 hours. Yet your phone is on your bedstand and you get a notification from, I don't know, friggin' Clash Royale, for example. It's like, ding, get ready for battle. Sure, it might be tempting to open your phone and play Clash Royale or whatever game. It might be fun. It might even quell your stress a little for the upcoming school day. But remember, you have to get up in 3 hours, so you're going to be super sleep deprived if you decide to play a round. Because deep inside, you probably know that one round is going to turn into 2 rounds and so on and so on. So based on that, is it a wise decision to reach to your phone and open up a game of Clash Royale? I don't know. It's because if we're going off by the basis of things being right or wrong, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer because you can always set up arbitrary guidelines on what classifies as what. For example, if your definition of right and wrong comes from, I don't know, having fun, I guess the right thing to do would be to open up your phone and play a game or two. If your definition of right and wrong is based on, I don't know, squeezing the most sleep in as possible wherever and whenever, I guess the right thing there would be to go to sleep. However, because those decisions were made with your arbitrary distinction on what is right and wrong in your opinion, that could lead to some troubles, such as, okay, if your definition of right comes from having as much fun as possible, you're just going to end up goofing off during class and not pay attention to what's being taught, thus failing all your classes. If your definition of what is right is getting as much sleep as possible, you're going to sleep during class and also end up failing. However, if we're judging the situation based on wisdom and what is wise, and you lay out the factors such as, okay, it's 4 a.m. right now, I have to wake up in 3 hours, I'm gonna feel groggy in the morning, My mood's gonna be all weird. And playing a game or two right now isn't going to be any different from me playing a game or two from when I am not tired and don't have school in 3 hours. I should squeeze in as much sleep as I possibly can right now. Notice how you're probably not going to end up regretting that decision later. And as an in-show example, if Rarity or Spike were to pursue a relationship with one another, would it actually be wise for them a year or two from now? Probably not. Like, the whole legality thing aside, Rarity is seen throughout the show to want to actually pursue a business and climb up the market. Even if Spike as a baby dragon was mentally older than we're led to believe, to the point where this ship isn't weird, should Rarity in this position really tack on additional responsibilities that could potentially get in the way of her dream? Would that be the wise thing to do here? And same with Spike. Even if there was nothing inherently wrong with the ship, such as species and age, is it a wise thing for Spike to pursue Rarity here? I think one responsible thing to remember is that Twilight and Rarity are in the same friend group. So even if these two did get into a relationship and they ended up breaking up, that's just gonna make everything super duper awkward for this group. So no, I don't think that there will be anything wise to come out of this ship at all. Anyways, all that aside, based on this observation I made,
This is from my new line of top of the cakes. I am gonna make one for each of you.
wow. Did she seriously just go to Spike's birthday party to advertise the fact that she's going to give everyone except him a special present? Especially because she goes on to elaborate that his exclusion is by the work of his own hands.
I've been inspired by the generosity of my little Spiky Wikey, who gave me this beautiful fire ruby. One of the kindest acts I've ever experienced.
Well, that's inconsiderate. And we know for a fact that she wasn't referring to Spike as one of her friends here because she makes these dresses by the end of the episode and Spike is without one. What the heck? I think we can conclusively conclude that Spike's costume was not made by Rarity. If she's cheap enough to skip out on making Spike a dress for his own birthday. Man, are we sure Spike was the one who had to learn a lesson about greed and sharing in this episode? For this one, something I probably should have clarified is about how some of you guys were confused as to why I kept referring to Commander Hurricane as a he. While yes, we do know that this play isn't 1,000,000,000% accurate based on the fact that Commander Hurricane was a man but was still played by Rainbow Dash.
Well, aren't you curious about how it went?
Oh, Commander Hurricane, sir, how did it go, sir?
This wasn't only because Private Pansy refers to him as Sir in the episode, but because if you look at the design of the founders in the mobile game, he's clearly a guy. So is Clover the Clever, but in this book, he's inconsistently referred to as a female. But I was referring to Hurricane as a male because that's at least consistent. Though, to be fair, I guess the only way anyone watching this would have actually known what I was referencing is if they played the game throughout this event, or if they read this book or did additional research themselves at some point. Yeah, that was my bad, and I should have clarified in the video. But other than that, there were two main things I brought up in this analysis. The first one being about trains. Speaking of trains, this is a different one than the one that we saw previously. Who knows why this is the case? Which one of these trains do you guys prefer? Because the aspects I like about this train is how it's more pony-ish, obviously. But the negative aspect is there's a bunch of questions that arise, such as, do these guys get tired at all? Or are they capable of running at this exact speed for the entire trip? More importantly, do they get paid per distance or per hour? The good thing about this one is that, well, it does solve all the questions I was asking about the other one. But on the bad side, it obviously loses some of the equestrian charm because it gets rid of the horses. It seems as if everyone unanimously prefers the engine trains, especially wondering why the pony run trains would have smoke coming out of it when that would only be a thing if it ran on an engine, which is a great point. What the heck? Plus, as my friend Ultrasonic Rainboom put it, this seems like a huge safety hazard. What happens if some of the stallions get too tired to run on the tracks? Would they get run over by the train? If they stay attached to the train, if they get too tired, would their hooves get violently dragged through the tracks, giving them serious injury and broken leg bones if they ever stop? If they do something like trip, they could break their bones and the train will force their bodies to be hitting the tracks at a fast rate. So if you are on the front of the train and you stop running even for a moment, you could get a handicap for the rest of your life, which is absolutely true. I'd imagine that they'd have some sort of insurance from the train company, but I doubt any sort of work-related injury compensation would outweigh the consequences of the actual accident itself. In other words, why would anyone take this job? Others have tried to think of reasons as to why this might be a thing, such as Appaloosa possibly not being as technologically advanced, or because the actual engine train broke down for that episode. Though that doesn't really stop the whole thing from being a huge safety hazard, so good thing these were eventually phased out. Well, sorta. There is something a little depressing behind this train change lurking in the background, but we'll get back to that in the Season 2 overview once we're done with covering all the individual episodes, because it ties in with a theme to do with this entire season, and not just these episodes with trains in them. The other main thing I put a lot of attention to was this flag. I'm so glad that this did not contain any weird discrepancies that we're gonna have to go out of our way to spend time to...
The three leaders agreed to share the beautiful land and live in harmony ever afterwards. And together, they
Okay. If this flag has Celestia and Luna on it, that means they were already princesses of Equestria! The flag, or banner, or whatever you want to call this, means that Celestia and Luna were already princesses who raced the sun and moon at this point. Which, putting the contradictory statement from earlier aside, if there's this much division between the three races of ponies, wouldn't that mean that they're being terrible leaders by not doing anything about this? Or letting literally their entire population die of hypothermia? Or letting all their subjects be tormented by these Wendigos? Was this before or after they fought Discord? Wouldn't it make much more sense if this land that they just established had Celestia and Luna pop up afterwards? Now, as a lot of you guys said, yeah, this is most likely a case of them just using the modern version for the audience to be able to catch on to what's going on better. However, I'd personally have preferred it if they were historically accurate, since if they're willing to change this, who the heck knows what else this production would have been willing to change? One thing I left out during our actual analysis of the episode is how the characters the main six play in the play are basically exaggerated versions of the personalities they already have, which seems pretty cool and lines up perfectly, but if they're taking creative liberties on the flag, I am now wondering if the founders' personalities were also creative liberties to play on the cast's strengths. Though, I guess that's a little bit more fair, since they were specifically asked to put this play on by Princess Celestia, so I guess they might as well have played to their strengths in this play in specific, but yeah, I really can't lend the same leeway for the flag thing. If it was because it would have been confusing to the audience, I don't see why it would have been that difficult to just plant the real one for the time here, and then just bring out the modern one afterwards, and show how Equestria has made progress since then. I think if anything, that would have actually added more impact to this scene. A couple of you said this might have been the original flag, featuring a prophecy of Celestia and Luna, since Clover the Clever was shown to have prophetic abilities, which I actually really like the idea of. However, the one prophecy we see her actually make in this episode turns out to be bogus.
Did the other pony tribes see reason as I predicted? Those other tribes are impossible! I, for one, can no longer bear to be anywhere near those lowly creatures.
So, who knows? Other than that, in regards to my attempt in the video,
we gotta do something to mark it off the holiday. Do a whole bit wearing a Santa hat and chocolate chip cookies and milk. This instance where I'm kicking you out.
I totally would, but I'm lactose intolerant, and the last time I tried to drink milk, it swelled up my breathing and I ended up in the emergency. Milk would kill me.
Ugh. Need to remind you that the girl that you like has left you undelivered for 2 months and counting now?
Some of you guys pointed out how, while I refer to this condition as lactose intolerance, some of you guys commented that this is probably a straight up allergy and not a simple intolerance. Yes, I agree. It's just that whenever I tell people that I'm allergic to dairy, the most common response I get is, "Don't you mean lactose intolerance?" So here I was trying to skip this step by mentioning a more common condition in line with that. But in the end, yeah, I should have just said allergic instead of lactose intolerant, because that's, you know, real. Then again, I'm pretty sure if I did, I would have gotten a few comments or a billion going, "Don't you mean lactose intolerance?" And I don't know. Maybe it's just there's something a bit personal to me, because there were times where I ate dairy and almost, you know, didn't make it. So I want to kind of skip that in the comments. But I guess this is a better alternative for me to say the wrong version and for you guys to actually see the right one in the comments as a response. So it's not all bad. But at the same time, I do know that if I said allergic to dairy, there would have been a couple of comments saying, "Don't you mean lactose intolerance?" Just for reference, in this exact comment section, I got a comment praising this Miku. I don't want to hold this weirdly. Give me a sec. Okay, so man. Okay, so I got a comment praising this Miku figure, and I got another one criticizing me for it, which just shows that there's no winning when it comes to the comment section. Okay, honestly, just for transparency's sake, I don't really listen to Vocaloid. I only got this just to troll people who notice it in the background. Because I saw that thing at GameStop, and I was like, Okay, so if I was an ABG and I had that thing, no one would bat a single eye. They'd be like, oh, it's so cute, it's so kawaii, it fits you perfectly. But if I get it, it looks disgusting and it looks really bad. And I thought that would be really, really, really funny. But I actually forgot about the fact that I even got this until people brought it up in the comments. So there you go. There's just no winning here. I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. But honestly, it's not so bad. You guys should take that as inspiration. If you guys want to put yourselves out there, whether it's content creation or just, I don't know, socially, and you get negative reception, remember that you're going to get negative reception no matter what, or no matter what aisle or side you're on. If you're on the right side, you're going to get hate from the left side and support from the right side. If you're on the left side, you're going to get support from the left side and hate from the right side. And I'm not talking in a political sense, though. I guess it applies, but I just mean in literally any take possible. So my advice for when you're discouraged from comments from, I don't know, online or real life, there's always going to be people who support you and people who are against you. It's just the way human nature is, I guess. And while you can't control the negative aspects, you can control how you choose to react to them and whether you're going to ask for support on people who are on your side. And I think that's what really matters. I guess my point is negativity isn't the end all be all, because for every negativity, there will be positivity. And for every disagreement, there will be agreement. And for every discouragement, there will be encouragement. It's just what side do you choose to lean towards and accept into your insides. But I think you guys have had enough about genuine me. I'm gonna go moving on. What I found interesting about this episode is what Laura MLP Leal said. Fun fact, the TV channel that aired MLP here in Brazil banned this episode after a few reruns cause apple bloom behavior was too inappropriate for young watchers. Which would line up with how I mentioned how the Cutie Mark Crusaders seem extra mischievous and elder abusing than usual in this episode. Were the Cutie Mark Crusaders always like this, or are they being extra manipulative just because Granny Smith is an easy target? Because if it is that, that's awful. Obviously, they have been shown to be impatient and mischievous throughout multiple episodes thus far. I'm not ignoring that. But I think this is a first for them doing stuff like this. Thus, I tried to look into this claim, but the closest thing I could find was on the Portuguese version of the My Little Pony wiki, where it claims that it was actually never aired in Brazil, and also the reason for that is unknown. So I'm not sure if this comment is talking about some other channel, because the information here is obviously conflicting, but if the case is that these are talking about two different channels, wow, I guess Brazil just really hates this episode. One point that totally slipped my mind while watching was that a flashback with younger Granny Smith should have given her a name before she was a granny, or at least it should have clarified if that was still her name as a younger pony. That is true, since if Granny Smith isn't a grandma, the pun in her name entirely falls apart. Then again, because Granny Smith is an actual apple, that technically could have always been her name, with it just being some sort of coincidence / destiny that she did end up growing to be a grandmother. But on a more personal note, another thing a lot of you guys commented about was my son Cecil, asking if we'll ever see more of him. Guys, this is Cecil. Say hi, Cecil.
Hi.
Yeah, he's a little shy. This is his first time on video. But hopefully watching this episode together as father and son will allow him to open up a little. Well, the thing is, like I said there, Cecil is very shy and prefers to do things behind the scenes. For example, he's been my cameraman for a while, even before he was actually in front of the camera. In fact, he's behind this camera right now. It's just that he doesn't really like being in front of the camera all that much, unless if I persuade him. In fact, let me just take the camera.
My cammy whammy.
Prop it down. Okay, Cecil, come out. Say hi, Cecil.
Hi.
But on that note, we've been getting quite a few comments under the impression that I was the one who gave birth to him, which I guess implies that it's easier for you guys to believe that I somehow completely bent the rules of basic biology than it is to believe that I made contact with a female. Wow, guys. Thanks for the fan art, at least. Right, Cecil? What do we say, Cecil?
Thank you.
Now, one thing I didn't really realize until it was a bit too late into this episode's retrospective's production is how Goddess Faust said that even though the Cakes and Pinky's relationship is that they are not related, Pinky was always their best customer and always hanging around anyway, so they let her rent the loft upstairs. She thinks that they probably pay her partially in sweets and that they love her like a daughter, which kind of answers the question that I brought up. What an odd group of people to be there at the hospital watching these babies. It sort of makes sense for Pinky to be here since... Wait, does it? Does the relationship between Pinky and the Cakes go beyond employee / tenant? I guess so, judging by the fact that, Pinky is here. But still, yes, it makes sense for Pinky to be here, and it makes sense for her to invite all her friends along with her. That's that. What isn't that, though, is what I said here. Wow, is that cake without the actual cake part? And is this a cupcake without the top half of the icing? Seems like not only is this bakery full of flies, but half of some of their food just straight up doesn't exist. A lot of you guys say that this is actually a cupcake lamp. I don't know, I was watching this with a friend and she brought up how it looked like an unfinished cake, so I just went with it. I don't know, I don't see it as a lamp. I think it really is an animation error. That dark brown in the middle just seems like a decor from the wall instead of what's supposed to be a lamp. Also, I don't see any satisfying explanations for what that floating cherry is supposed to be, so yeah, I don't know, I don't see it. The same friend I watched this with also told me that this scene is a reference to this scene in this movie called Train Spotting. Where it's the main character hallucinating from serious withdrawal from abstaining from drugs. And the My Little Pony wiki actually attests to this, so wow, that is a lovely reference to put in the show for little kids. Cecil, no more My Little Pony for the time being, alright? Okay, so earlier I said that there was a thing that I said during the analysis of The Return of Harmony that people were kind of put off by. That was this comment. In like the early promos for this episode/season, they purposefully left out any appearance of Discord. Presumably one of the reasons being to keep the fact that he's voiced by Q from Star Trek as a surprise for the older fans of the fanbase. Now, I don't know anything about Star Trek except for the fact that if you are into it and you have a Star Trek collectible in your house, which I don't, you're statistically a pedophile. Okay, so if you were paying attention to the screen when I said that, unlike what these commenters were probably doing, you'd know that I wasn't personally saying that all Star Trek fans are you-know-whats. And in the same vein, I wasn't saying that no My Little Pony fans are. I think everybody knows all too well there are disgusting people in this fandom who do make me kind of disgusted to share a common interest with. But back to the point, what I was referencing is what that particular article is saying. In 2001 to 2005, all but 100 plus offenders they caught in Toronto had Star Trek paraphernalia in their rooms. I just found that statistic to be very mind-blowing. It's so random how they were able to find that as like a common denominator with this group of criminals, because I wonder how many they had to go through before they established that pattern. I thought it was intriguing and threw it in as a fun-ish fact. Okay, I guess it's not fun, but it's remarkable, I guess. And the first thing that came to... Remarkable does mean mark-worthy, right? Not like, awesome, that was remarkable, guy, right? I'm gonna have to double check that, but I think you know what I mean. Okay, I gotta look this up real quick. Remarkable. Worthy of attention. Striking. Yeah, I guess that applies. Yeah, I guess I thought it was a little worthy of attention because this is unfortunately the first thing that comes to mind on the topic of Star Trek as a casual toe dipper into true crime stuff. I don't think I've ever mentioned that on this channel, but yeah, I do sometimes look at true crime stuff in the background. Though, anyways, I think I get why that was the case and why this was a statistic, especially in the early half of the 2000s. Or at least I think I know. I might be pulling this out of nowhere, but bear with me. So nowadays, there's the entire stereotype where if you're a grown man that likes My Little Pony or Genshin or Minecraft or anime or animation in general, honestly, you're a creep toward children. And if you take a look at all those, what they have in common are fantasy elements that work as escapism tactics from everyday life, which are probably attractive ideas for people who are more likely to do weird and illegal things. However, the things that I listed just now, such as My Little Pony and modern anime and Genshin and Minecraft and all that, yeah, they didn't exist when this article was relevant. And the closest thing to that during this time was probably Star Trek. Therefore, this unfortunately happened. Now, obviously, it doesn't make me happy that this happened, and I genuinely hope that all these victims of all this are better off now and justice was served. But I also at least want to take this opportunity and say that if you watching happen to fit into the category of being a loner who looks to cartoons and anime and video games as a coping mechanism in the form of escapist fantasies, use that energy and create something good that uplifts others, even in a small way. Especially because I used to turn to escapism tactics to not pay attention to everyday life, but instead of doing what these scum unfortunately resorted to doing, I found ways to try to be uplifting for both myself and hopefully for all of you guys watching via content creation, thus making life fun for myself so I don't have to look for escapism fantasies. And so I don't have to go down this lonely, dark path. Now, I really don't know why I'm being more sappy than usual in this video. Actually, I think I do know why, but we'll save that reason for the future if it ever becomes relevant again. But yeah, I genuinely think this is something that some of you guys need to hear. I'm not trying to sell you guys a course or list you guys into some email scam or anything. I'm genuinely saying this from whatever's left of my heart. To reiterate, if you are in a lonely, sad state, use that energy to lift others around you up. Because I was at that state at some point, and I realized that through my videos, I can try to make you guys laugh and hopefully not feel alone so much. And also kind of why I use minimal editing to kind of feel more like a friend. Not in a parasocial way, but just in a way where I want to be more like someone you kind of bounce your ideas off of rather than you're coming here to watch me. That's why I'm so, you know, I guess deep in this attempt to kind of, you know, make this sort of feel more like a community. And, you know, as I keep growing and realizing this, it's like, yeah, my videos are a whole lot less vulgar than they used to be. I'm not only focusing on negatives now, I'm also bringing up a lot of positives. I'm trying to do what I can to kind of cultivate a community for you guys who might feel lonely. Now, I'm not saying that through these I'm perfect or that I'm above reproach. And some of you guys might actually disagree with those attempts. Fine, that's completely fine. If you guys want to say I'm not succeeding in any of those points, go ahead. Sure, that's fine. That you're entitled to your own opinion. But I'm just saying from my perspective, that's what I'm kind of doing, whether I consciously realize it or not. You know what? That's the mini takeaway of this video, or major takeaway. Depends on your perspective. It ties in with what I said earlier, that life is going to throw hardships and disagreements with you. It's all about how you choose to respond to them. Are you feeling lonely? Good. Let's use that emotion and energy to create something positive. Are you getting disagreements and anger and hatred thrown at you? Good. Use that sorrow, use that energy that comes from that to create something that will make these people eat their words. Are you not subscribed to Eff Minus? Simple. Click on the subscribe button immediately. Man. Anyways, with all that long-winded stuff out of the way, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I know this was a pretty different format for this channel. And if you're new to this channel and you actually watched it all the way to this point, leave a comment because I'm astounded and I will, I don't know, give you some kind of prize. I just want to give a huge thank you to my patrons, David, Jack Ryan, Jiho Nguyen, Kurisu, Leafycune, Libby Licious, Manon Robbins, Meeper89, Nix, Stupid B-Word, Taya, The Farter29, Trippy Toonie, Ultrasonic Rainboom, and Verfirmed Mutt Joe. Feel free to also pledge, link in the description, if you also want your name in the credits. And other than that, thanks for watching. I love you.